What's up, Flannelers? It is week 14, Thursday Night Football. Adam and I are going to be breaking down the game for DraftKings Showdown, going position by position, starting with quarterbacks, then running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. We'll answer any questions you have as we go. I have run the Sims. I think Adam is also currently running the Sims. We'll let you know what the Sims say. This one, of course, a unique slate in that Amon-Ra St. Brown appears likely to be out. We don't know for sure yet at this point. I think most of our conversation is going to work under the assumption that Amon-Ra St. Brown is out. But we'll be getting into it here with quarterbacks. Adam, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
Doing well. I'm relatively excited for this slate. Like Thursday, obviously, we get a lot of ugly games, but we have two good teams, and neither of them are on a short week, so that's nice too. Like 54.5 point total, I think, is the highest of the entire week. So it'll probably still suck, but at least there's reason to think that it won't right now.
Yeah, it's like a rare good Thursday Night Football game, which we've had a few of them this year, but I feel like in years past, it's always been Thursday Night Football is like the Jets and Steelers, and you just like hate your life that you have to watch this game and cheer for certain things to happen. This one is like actually kind of a fun game theoretically. Adam is passive aggressively requesting Flannelers. What's this in reference to?
Me not wearing a hat, I assume.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, I'll send you a hat, Adam. I'd be happy to. I only have not sent Adam a hat because I just assume he would not wear a Flannelers hat, but I'll send you one anyway.
I mean, I would wear it. I wouldn't wear it like out.
Okay. All right. I'll send you one then. Yeah, I'd be happy to send Adam a Flannelers hat. All right. Quarterbacks. Man, I'm sort of surprised by what I'm seeing here. Dak Prescott, 10,400 projected for 45% flex, 15% captain ownership. I'm getting a 65% flex, 8% captain. But Jared Goff, 10,000 projected for 43% flex, 9% captain. This is the one that shocks me. I'm only getting to 26% in the flex, 0% at captain. So let's get into the quarterbacks. Wherever you want to start, Dak Prescott and Jared Goff. Are you getting similar things here?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of Dak. I'm a little under the field on him at captain, but over the field at flex. So in the aggregate, coming in, I think pretty close to his ownership projection, if not a little bit above it. But same page as you as far as not getting to as much Goff. So I'm curious to see if either the Goff ownership comes down a little bit or if I just don't get there quite as much, because I really don't like, I don't have a strong take one way or the other. I obviously wouldn't mind if I'm playing Jared Goff, but at the same time, I think I can pretty easily defend if he's going to be, 40, 45% owned, having less of him just because of how many good players there are on this slate, even if we assume Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't play, because if he doesn't play, it's a pretty big bump to Jameson Williams, who is 1,600 less than Goff. But then you have Lamb, you have Pickens, who's performing at a high level. You have Gibbs, who I think might have the highest median projection of anybody that we've had all season. I'm not positive, but it's got to be close, if not. You have Dak, and then like Javonte Williams is solid. So there's a lot of like pass catchers that are similarly priced or even less expensive than Jared Goff that project similarly. So I am really interested to see where that ownership actually ends up coming in. I don't really mind if it is actually going to be, 40, 45%. I don't mind having more Jahmyr Gibbs, having, more of name whatever receiver you prefer.
Yeah, no, it's so I'm on the same page as like there are so many other spend ups that I wouldn't mind being underweight. This just seems like really low for Jared Goff. Looking at the pass rate over expectation for the Cowboys, it was, kind of a not really a run funnel. I guess it was kind of they're just bad against everybody. But recently it's been like a major pass funnel. Looking at the pass rate over expectation, just like since their week 10 bye, it's been way over in week 11. They were second in terms of being a pass funnel offense, and then in week 12 they were second again. Week 13 a little bit lower, but still fifth in terms of pass rate over expectation against them. So to me, it's like they added Quinnen Williams on defense, and now everybody's attacking that Dallas defense through the air because it's a lot tougher on the ground. So yeah, I guess I've been working under the assumption that I'm going to play a lot of Goff. This would kind of scare me. It is possible that, we saw the bump down last week with Amon-Ra St. Brown hurt in the first quarter. They obviously, that was not against Dallas. Never mind. But I guess we could see that Detroit throws the ball less just because Amon-Ra St. Brown is out, even if it is a pass funnel matchup. And they're already like a run first team anyway. So I don't know. It's surprises me a bit just because I want to lean in on this offense in a spot where they should be passing a lot. But guess I wouldn't be surprised to be underweight.
So like this is a spot too where, I've said it a lot in the past that I do, if I see that I happen to be taking a pretty strong stand one way or the other, I do like to look and kind of see what my inputs were and make sure that, I didn't inadvertently do something. I think this is actually interesting because at least last I looked, the prop over under pass attempts for Jared Goff was I think 31.5. And we have him projected for 33 pass attempts. So we're not low there. We have him at 253 passing yards, which is very close. I don't remember if it's right above or right below where his line is, but it's right there. I manually adjusted a little bit towards increased running for Detroit because of them, assuming they don't have St. Brown. Obviously it can go both ways. It's a tricky thing to project, but on the one hand, Jameson Williams is going to project really, really well, but also he's the only guy that the Cowboys have to worry about defending at all. And the Lions could, very easily try to not rely quite as heavily on the passing game when you don't have not only Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Sam Laporta or Brock Wright. I mean, you're down to tight end 3. You're down to Jameson Williams and, scrub wide receivers. No disrespect to Sla. But, you could kind of see it go either way. But the thing that really stands out to me is even doing that, even bumping them to try and run a little bit more, it didn't put us below the pass attempt mark for Goff. 86 passing yard projection for Jameson Williams. His prop is 80.5. So it's not that pushed anything below the prop market or, which again, it's not perfect. You shouldn't be using that as the end all be all, but it's a good, just kind of measure for, am I moving too much in one direction or the other? And
right.
There's nothing about his projection that I think screams that it's too low.
Yeah. So using props is basically checks and balances on your work. It doesn't show anything that your work looks off. If anything, right. It sounds like you're maybe even still high, even after decreasing it. That's interesting. And we're still getting well below the field on Goff. Well, I hope things change between now and lock, because I will not be happy to get 25% Goff. Feels risky. But to your point, we do have a lot of good spend ups. I guess what surprised me more is that I'm getting to so much of Dak and so little of Goff, with Dak being more expensive and getting more ownership. That part, and it's a slightly, I guess, not that tough matchup. So this is the best possible matchup for Jared Goff in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game over the past 5 weeks. It's not a bad matchup for Dak either. The 6th best matchup for the Cowboys over the past 5 weeks. So I guess it's a positive matchup for both. Cowboys may be more inclined to throw the ball. Ultimately, when you play Dak Prescott and Jared Goff, I assume we're stacking them up. And when we have them at captain, probably going to be multi-stacking most of the time.
Yeah, I would think so. And one big difference between Dak and Goff is Dak is not a running quarterback, but he's more of a running quarterback than Jared Goff is.
Yeah.
You're talking about, somewhere in the 10 to 12% rushing market share for Dak Prescott on average. Jared Goff's at 4%. So you're projecting literally one run for 3 yards and no touchdown equity for Jared Goff. Whereas Dak, you're projecting 3 to 4 carries or rush attempts, 12 yards, a little bit of touchdown upside. I think he's got 2 on the season. Yeah. So, it's not that he's a rushing quarterback, but Jared Goff is in the Aaron Rodgers camp of you are getting 0 on the ground. Dak is giving you a point and a half. So there is that difference as well. And then you also, you do have Dak throwing to Lamb and George Pickens as opposed to Jameson Williams and nobody. So there is that. But yeah, I would expect to be stacking both of them when they're at captain. Just, kind of taking a quick look at the lineups when I have Dak at captain. It's very heavily stacked with Cowboys. I would absolutely expect more of the same with the Lions. A bunch of cheap guys. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs counts as a pass catcher. Jameson Williams going to get in there a lot. Heavily stacking with both guys at captain.
Yeah, and you can see my top lineups with Dak Prescott here. The first one has CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Kevontae Turpin, and Luke Schoonmaker. So it's a 5-1 with Dak at captain. Second lineup, we've got 3 Cowboys pass catchers. So yeah, it's the same thing for me with Dak at captain. And then I would assume it's the same for Jared Goff. All of his pass catchers being relatively inexpensive. Also, if you have Jared Goff at captain, I only got to look at this one Jared Goff captain within my top 300 lineups. So Jared Goff really not looking good at captain, but generally the best do have several Lions pass catchers.
And I think AFC Angelo just made the good point as well. That it deserves to be mentioned explicitly. You're also walking a really fine line with Jared Goff captain lineups because you're actually going to probably need like some combination of Kennedy, Tesla, Dwelly, Ferkser to like do something, because it's pretty likely that whatever production Jared Goff gets, a ton of it is just funneled to Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams, and it's going to be really easy for one of those guys to end up being the captain over Goff. I mean, 253 passing yard projection on Goff right now, 48 yards to Gibbs, 86 yards to Williams. That's like roughly 60% or something of Jared Goff's passing production going to two players, one of whom is cheaper than him.
Right. Yeah.
And one of whom also projects for like 90 rushing yards.
Yeah. No, I would assume Jared Goff a captain, you're absolutely going to want multiple pass catchers with him, and it's a fine line for sure, because you need to really be spreading the ball. I mean, that's the case with like any pass catching quarterback to some extent. Like, it's a fine line to get them at any quarterback who doesn't run, to get them in at captain. It's always sort of a fine line, but yeah, you're right. It's an especially fine line here, where it's like he only has one pass catcher who is, I guess two with Gibbs, who are like expensive, but then a lot of his top pass catchers are really inexpensive. So yeah, it's an even finer line than usual to get Jared Goff a captain. It doesn't surprise me that I'm not getting much Jared Goff a captain. It surprised me more that I'm not getting to a bit more at flex. But I guess it does make some sense. Anything else on quarterbacks?
No.
All right. Let's move on to running backs. Starting with Jahmyr Gibbs, is 11,000 projected for 49% flex ownership, 20% captain ownership. Even with those massive ownership numbers, I'm getting to 46% in the flex, so just slightly under the field there, and then 48% at captain for Jahmyr Gibbs. I did, I believe, list him as my favorite captain in the expert survey. I think it makes a lot of sense with all of the other stars out for the Lions. We probably just see Jahmyr Gibbs even more involved. Like, is he even CMC light at this point with the workload, or do you think it's just going to be CMC going forward?
Yeah, and that's so like we have him projected right now for about 50% flex ownership, 20% captain. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the aggregate, 80, 85% owned instead of 70, because I think he's just such an obvious play, and you can make so many different arguments for why you would want him. For one, like, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, that by itself, but you have like a 0.3 target per route run in the 3 weeks since Laporte has been out. Now, we're assuming St. Brown is not playing either. Shouldn't do anything to hurt the targets for Gibbs. They've been feeding him the ball on the ground more. Who knows how long that continues, but over their last few games, you've seen a higher rushing market share for Gibbs as well. And that includes Ben Johnson saying, we want to give David Montgomery the ball more, and then just not doing it. 60, 75, and 67% rushing market share the last 3 games for Jahmyr Gibbs. To put that in context, those are 3 of the 4 highest marks of the entire season. His average is like 53%. So there is some chance that it just goes back to 53% and Montgomery gets more carries today. But there is also a real chance that they keep feeding Jahmyr Gibbs like they have the last 3 weeks. And, again, he's obviously going to be somebody getting a lot of targets you fully expect. So there's just so many ways to get to justify getting to him. He has one of the highest projections that anybody's had all season. I do think it'll come down a little bit, because I thought I had adjusted for Dallas's run defense being better, but turns out I hadn't. So he's going to lose, a handful of rushing yards, but that's not going to make a huge dent. You're talking about somebody projected for like 27 fantasy points. So I do think that ownership probably actually ends up coming in a little bit higher. But that being said, I have a really difficult time not wanting to get to Jahmyr Gibbs regardless. He's in 52% of my lineups at flex right now, 42% at captain. And I really have no issue whatsoever with that, because he just can get there so many different ways.
Yeah, it's like he's going to get the ball. It is not the best matchup. As noted, Dallas has become more of a pass funnel since they added Quinnen Williams. So over the past 5 weeks, this is the 7th worst matchup. After most of the year, it was like a top 2 or 3 matchup for running back. So it's actually gone from being a great matchup to a negative matchup for the running backs. But I think it's just the CMC type workload is what we're expecting for Jahmyr Gibbs. And you see in tough matchups, CMC all the time gets 24 fantasy points, 25 fantasy points. And then we get a little bit cheaper for DeAndre Swift than like I would expect CMC to be 12,200 or something. Whereas we get Jahmyr Gibbs at 11,000. So the value is there. And even with the more of a pass funnel matchup, like that doesn't even really negatively affect Gibbs that much because he's so involved in the passing game. So yeah, he kind of stands out as a fantastic play. And then we also have David Montgomery on the Lions, who looks like I'm actually getting to a lot of David. I was curious what I was going to get with David Montgomery. At first glance, I was like, I feel like I can just fade David Montgomery at that price tag. But then the more I thought about it, it's like, yeah, but also with Amon-Ra St. Brown out, maybe they do just go back and give him the ball more. So he's projected for 18% flex, 1% captain at 7,000. I got to 31% flex and 3% captain. So actually well over the field on David Montgomery. I assume you're getting the same.
Yeah, I'm around like 25, 30% at flex too. And I think it's a pricing play also. Like you obviously have so many guys on the slate that you want to get to, whether it's the quarterbacks, Gibbs, numerous wide receivers. But like Javonte Williams is 9K as, the Dallas running back. Obviously Gibbs is 11K. Montgomery is sort of in a dead zone for pricing. You have Jake Ferguson at 7,400 and you have Montgomery at 7K. They project pretty similarly, but there's nobody else in that price range. Everybody else is either like Jamison Williams at 8,400 or higher, or like Brandon Aubrey 5,400 or lower. So I think Montgomery kind of serves as like not a true value play in the sense of like, obviously he's not a punt. He's not like opening up mega superstar lineups for you, but he is somebody that I think probably ends up fitting really nicely into a lot of different builds. And I don't think you have to really worry about who you're playing him with either because of Gibbs's prowess in the passing game. Even if this does end up being a game where they do, cut back Gibbs' rushing workload a bit and give more to Montgomery, obviously that's not perfect for Gibbs, but Gibbs's projection would go from, 26 and a half to 25 or something, 24 and a half. Like yeah. Gibbs would still project incredibly well, even if you knew Montgomery was going to get more carries. And there are different ways this game can play out too. Like we've mentioned it, Chad has mentioned it. If Detroit does decide, look, we don't have St. Brown, we don't have Laporta, we're going to try and just pound the rock with our two our very good running game. You could just get the situation where they run the ball a lot more than anybody's expecting. And that means that even if Montgomery stays at a 30% market share, it's 13, 14 carries instead of 9 carries. So like you can have that happen. You can just have him get into the end zone around the goal line. Like obviously there's that volatility. So even though I do like the last 3 weeks have really been not favorable in terms of opportunities for David Montgomery, I do like the price tag on a slate where you don't really have a lot around him.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. As you can see here, like as Adam said, not a great workload over the past few weeks, just 19 carries over the past 3 weeks to Jahmyr Gibbs, 47. Last year was like almost an even split. I think Gibbs led, but like barely. It was like a 55-45 type split. We are seeing the split has really divided this season between Gibbs and Montgomery. And then of course there's a huge split in the passing game as well. But like you said, just we could see them try to run the ball a lot more now that they don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I get it. I think it makes some sense. I honestly kind of wanted to just like take a stance and full fade Montgomery, but I do think there's a reasonable possibility that they're just going to try to run the ball quite a bit, and suddenly the $7,000 price tag is like appropriate for David Montgomery, and he's not going to get crazy high ownership. So I think the play actually does make sense.
One thing I would want to pay attention to if you're somebody playing a lot of lineups, not to say that like you have to play equal amounts Montgomery and Ferguson or anything like that, but I would probably want to make sure, and I checked and I have 20-something% Ferguson too, that like you're not unintentionally taking a stand on one of them, because I do think they're very similar plays, obviously completely different players, but very similar plays in that like there are the two guys in that price range that are just going to naturally fit into some lineups. So I did want to just, like make sure that I'm not accidentally jamming Montgomery and not playing any Ferguson. But once that's not the case, it's just like, yeah, I think both guys are useful.
Yeah. And going back to the Dan Campbell quote was from the 19th of November, said on how Campbell feels about the usage of David Montgomery since Campbell took over play calling duties, and did Campbell feel like he went away from Montgomery in some situations where the running back could have been used in the Eagles game. His quote was, I'd always love to get David more carries always, which to me is not like, a lot of people interpreted that as like, okay, I guess if David Montgomery is going to see a bigger workload going forward. That was more like he was asked specifically. He's not going to be like, nah, fuck David Montgomery. Right. Like it's like Jahmyr Gibbs is way better. Like I don't think he said anything that would like really indicated that he wants to get David Montgomery more involved, other than like, yeah, of course I want to get my players the ball. But yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned it with Gibbs, but while we're on the running backs, since Dan Campbell took over play calling against Washington week 10, 0.35 targets per route run for Jahmyr Gibbs. He was already getting a ton of targets, obviously. He was at like 0.26 or 0.27 or something for the season, but 0.35 targets per route run in 4 games since Dan Campbell took over.
Yeah, pretty good usage for Gibbs. But yeah, the case for Montgomery, obviously, we just made the case there. On the Cowboys side, we have Javonte Williams, Malik Davis, Hunter Lipke. Javonte Williams, 9,000 projected for 23% flex, 3% captain ownership. I'm getting to 30% flex, 4% captain, just slightly over the field in both spots. I think that makes sense. Are you seeing similar with Javonte Williams?
Yeah. To the point that you love making, he hasn't really had huge games over the last month or so, but at 9K he does look fine. 23% ownership. I have 33%. I have 9% captain ownership as well at 3% owned. Not that I think he's like super likely to be the optimal captain or anything like that, but you do get some negative correlation with, obviously people are going to want to get to the Dallas passing game aggressively, and they should. There's no reason that you wouldn't want to, but if you just happen to get the Javonte Williams falls into the end zone 2 or 3 times game, obviously that's taking touchdowns away from Lamb, Pickens, and Dak. So that works. Maybe you just get a game where both teams end up running a lot more than we expect, and you get some sort of like Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, big game from both type thing. Like there's just enough different ways. Like when you have 2 teams that can score a lot of points, you don't necessarily want to get too bogged down in predicting exactly how those points are scored, because it's extremely volatile. You're not going to get it right in general. Everybody's well aware that like the most likely guys to score the touchdowns are Lamb, Pickens, etc. But so much of it just has to do with, Lamb gets tackled at the 2, Javonte scores. Pickens gets pass interference at the 1, Javonte scores. There's just so much of that type of stuff that at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want about Javonte Williams. You think he's good, you don't think he's good, whatever. He's a $9,000 running back on the Cowboys in a game with a 54.5 total, getting 25% ownership.
Yeah, it seems like a totally like reasonable, good play, just given the ownership. It is a tough matchup here against Detroit, slightly tough, worse than neutral. Looks like it's a bottom 10 matchup for Dallas against the Cowboys, but the workload has been pretty good for Javonte, just under 20 carries per game over the past 3 since their bye. Yeah, 59 carries, so just 1 under 20 per game, along with 7 targets, so over 2 targets per game on 41% route participation. We'll take that kind of usage at 9,000. So Javonte does look pretty good here. I think there's something in chat that I wanted to. Oh yeah, Aaron Smith asked, are projections factoring in Dan Campbell going for every 4th and less than 4 in this game, as it is essentially must win, and he loves to go down being aggressive? Interesting phrasing. I would assume that yes, like it's factored in, because the Lions are going to have a higher total as a result, and he's always aggressive, so like the number of plays per game that the Lions have should reflect that. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's naturally reflected in what the Lions do.
Yeah. All right. Beyond Javonte, so yes, Javonte, I think I'm happy being overweight there if he only gets 26% total ownership. Again, nearly 20 carries per game over the past 3 weeks.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but also just like to backtrack, because I think anybody, obviously I have no idea if Aaron Smith, who asked the question, has done projections before, but like I think there is also a tendency to like think that things would move projections a lot more than they would. Right. Like even if you do think that like literally he's going to go on every 4th and less than 4, which he's not. But like even if you think that, you're talking about maybe like 1-2 additional plays, and so you're talking about like 0.1 extra targets for people. Like it's not actually moving much of anything outside of probably lowering the kicker.
Yeah, yeah, because they're going to fail a lot of the time anyway when they go for it on 4th and less than 4. So like in that case, it's just 1 extra play. Obviously, it can extend the drive and give you more plays, but like a lot of coaches are going to go for it on 4th and short anyway. So it's not like they do it.
Yeah, you're not talking about like a massive difference. It's the same thing that you get when people talk about like coverage matchups or whatever. Like you can move projections in the correct direction, but like people tend to talk about stuff like that as if like, somebody with a 25-point projection should actually be 28. And it's like, no, they should be 25.3.
Right. We're stacking little things that like barely move the needle, and enough of them can move the needle significantly. But would not make that makes sense. I've also never done projections. So you have a better idea of how much these things matter than I do. All right. Outside of Javonte, Malik Davis and Hunter Lipke. Davis is 1,400 projected for 3% flex ownership. I got to 6. Lipke 400 projected for 5%. I got to 10. Neither of them getting any captain ownership. I'm not getting any captain of either of them. We did see Davis score the touchdown in the last game on Thanksgiving. Good to see that. 10 carries over the past 3 weeks, 0 targets on 10% route participation. Lipke just 1 carry, but then 4 targets on 10% route participation. How much are you getting to of Davis and Lipke?
Yeah, 5% Lipke, 7% Davis. Perfectly fine with both of those. Lipke obviously is free. You have plenty of good players to get to on this slate, so it is entirely possible that one catch for 4 yards at $400 ends up being in the optimal lineup, depending on how things work out. Obviously, Davis has had like a actual backup role each of the last 3 weeks, 10 to like 12% rushing market share. So again, you're not like putting much stock into him, but you expect him to get a few carries, and at 1,400, that's worth mixing into some lineups here and there.
Yeah, and I'm I always like playing the backup running backs. Looks like I'm getting into it naturally with Malik Davis. I might play even more than what I'm getting right now, under the same theory as usual of just like I think there's the contingent upside is so huge for the backup running backs, but on this slate in particular, it's like we don't have a ton of really great super value. Like we do have Tom Kennedy at 2,000, so we actually do have some strong value on the slate that he would then need to outscore somebody who has an actual role on the Lions. But I think there is mega upside there, so I'll probably push it up more than what I naturally get in the projections, as I usually do with backup running backs. But I'm already getting over the field, so don't have to push it up that far on either of them. And Malik Davis, who I would say has, like you said, some standalone role, but then obviously awesome contingent upside. I don't really think Lipke has a ton of contingent upside. Like I don't think he would come in and suddenly get 12 carries if we get an injury to Javonte Williams. I'd be pretty surprised. But has just a natural standalone role, and he's cheaper. All right.
One other thing I'll mention, I was actually going to wait to say it when we were talking about the wide receivers, but AFC Angelo brought it up already, so I'll just point it out here with the running backs. I do think if you're playing like the large field lottos and you are trying to really limit dupes, that running back range where I was talking about, Montgomery kind of being by himself, you had Ferguson there, but then even Javonte Williams, being 9K, I do think that is an interesting range where like you can just turn Javonte Williams into David Montgomery, and right there you're leaving $2,000 on the table, or you can turn David Montgomery into Brandon Aubrey or Tesla or whatever, even Javonte Williams in the Tesla or something. Like that's a range where, like a lot of times if you build a lineup that's leaving 5K on the table, it's just going to be a shit lineup. But I think in that specific spot, like obviously Javonte Williams and then Montgomery and Ferguson project better than that tier below them, but it is close enough that it's not, inconceivable that they lose, that they get beat by a kicker or Tom Kennedy or Tesla or something like that. So in that specific spot, I do actually think you can like leave a lot of salary. Like I'd be a lot more inclined to do it with that range of guys, the running back range, than like, obviously I don't really want to just like turn Jahmyr Gibbs into Isaac Tesla. Like that's really fucking stupid. But doing it with like Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, I think that spot is actually fine.
Yeah, agreed. And I always warn people with leaving salary on the table. Something that I do frequently. I've always liked to do. That like you do remember if you're hand building that like that salary can be spent at every position. So you need to like check on every position. Like, is it actually reasonable that this player can outscore everybody up to $5,000 more expensive than them? But on this slate is like this slate very specifically, like you're saying, it's like that is because there's a big enough gap between guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Isaac Tesla. Those like you just need Isaac Tesla to be able to outscore David Montgomery and Jake Ferguson and like guys that he very easily could outscore, and then it's kind of the same thing to bump up. But I wouldn't make the same pivot for like leave $8,000 on the table and have Isaac Tesla instead of Jahmyr Gibbs, because that's like well, that's just pretty unlikely to happen.
Yeah, like a lot of times when because I'm not very good at playing the dupe game, honestly, because I think it's just like such a nuanced thing. It's very difficult to like do it well. But the lineups that I see that like good players will occasionally be at the top with that do leave a lot of salary. The thing that like I'm always like I need to like find a way to like automate just this specifically, because it's not, just leave 5K. It's like finding that range of player that is most fragile and being willing to leave 5K off of them. Like,
Yes. Yep.
if you look at the projections, right? And, obviously you're sacrificing median projection, but without getting into, like players' actual individual standard deviations, all of that stuff, just think about a touchdown is 6 points. And we know how volatile touchdowns are. If you look at the projections that came out of the sim that I ran before the show, David Montgomery's at 12.5 fantasy points. Guys that are within one touchdown of that projection, Jake Ferguson, basically the same price. Tesla, 4,400. Kennedy, 2K. Turpin, 2,400. Dwelly's right there at 2,800. He's 6.5 points behind Montgomery. So, like, obviously you're giving up a lot of projection there. But when you factor in the volatility, like, that's the spot where you're giving it up, but it's not like super robust projection where like David Montgomery's never going to score 6 or something like that.
Yeah. I also should note that, I mean, you look through my top lineups in the using the shady, so it's not exactly in order, but I am mostly using fairly close to the full salary cap. These ones I would expect largely to be duped, but like leaving 5,000 on this slate is going to be more tough just because we do have so many spend up options. So it's like there's always somebody that you can spend up for. I don't know, just be very cognizant of what you're doing when you're leaving salary on the table. And remember, you can't just be like, oh, here's my lineup, and I think this one player could outscore this one player, so I can leave 5,000 on the table. Keep in mind that 5,000 can be used at every single spot. So you got to be comparing the salary range for every one of those. But it's always fun. Like, I like hand building for Showdown. Sometimes I obviously don't do it anymore because I'm making my lineups on the show. But I used to kind of enjoy it because you can always like look through and be like, all right, this one leaves usually not 5,000 for me, but like this one leaves 1,500 on the table. And I just compare everyone. It's like, oh yeah, this is perfect because that player that I would want to get to ahead of this one is $1,600 more expensive. And I'm only leaving 15. Like those are like the perfect lineups where it's like, there's literally no spot where I'm, giving up significant, like in terms of odds of outscoring the other.
Right.
So yeah, just, it's fun though. I agree. It's tough playing the Duke game because there is a lot of nuance that goes into it. And then you see, some lineups, then you'll see like nerdy tenors lineups will be like, use the full 50,000 and has this player that like I didn't even like put in my player pool, but like he obviously can score points, and I don't know. It's a fun game.
Yeah, it's on my list of things to do to try and build like a better Duke model. But I'm mostly in the camp personally with Showdown where like I'm just trying to not play like the most duped lineups. Because I know that I'm not great at predicting dupes and all of that. Like, and I think like a lot of good players play that way. I know like Nerdy has talked about it a lot on our endgame shows too. About because the problem is like the fewer dupes your lineup has, the more likely it is that it's just a bad lineup.
Right.
So like you have to actually be good at figuring out what good lineups are, and then also separately how often it's going to be duped. I don't think I'm great at. I think I'm much better at the good lineup part than the dupe part. But like there are some people where they consistently have very low dupe lineups and they're very obviously good lineups, and it's just like, okay, I wish I could do that, but I can't. But like to your point, like you do have to pay a lot of attention to that. Like you don't want to end up with a lineup somewhere where you have like just straight up Tesla over Lamb, or I mean, like any 1v1, I guess you can sort of defend, but like you wouldn't want like Tesla plus Kennedy, and you could have Lamb or Pickens, and you don't have either one kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just something to always keep in mind. I just like, I think people often make the mistake of just like, oh, I'll leave all the salary on the table, and like they just consider the 1v1. Like I could see this player outscoring this one, and so I always like to warn people, like if you're hand building, just keep in mind that the salary spends on any spot in your lineup.
I just of the lineups I built, I just put in a $47,000 max salary just to see like what the EVs look like, and there are some, there's plenty that are, it's probably I would from eyeballing it say there's probably like 30 lineups that are showing up S plus EV with like $47,000 max. If I go to 46, it gets down to like 6.
Okay, yeah, so it's tough to leave a ton just because we have so many spend ups that project extremely well on this slate. It's going to be, you're leaving a lot of projection by leaving too much salary on the table. So maybe not the best one to leave a ton. All right. Any other, move on to wide receivers. I think we talked about running backs sufficiently. We can start with, let's start with the Cowboys, a little bit easier side. Maybe we'll get the Amon-Ra St. Brown news. So we'll start with the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb projected for 32% flex, 15% captain ownership. I got to 43 flex, 15 captain, so over the field there. Pickens projected for 36 and 9. I got to 31 and 10, so over the field in the captain spot, underweight at flex. These two, for me, it's really tough to predict game to game, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. But here I'm fine with what I'm getting. Are you getting something similar?
Yeah, I'm getting to them both. 44% flex, 13% captain for Lamb, 38% flex, 11 captain for Pickens. They're basically the same price. They project very similarly. I've seen some places that actually have Pickens projected ahead of Lamb. We have Lamb slightly ahead of Pickens, but you're talking like a point and a half. I'm in the camp that like I kind of think it's crazy to project George Pickens ahead of CeeDee Lamb because one, it's CeeDee Lamb, and two, like CeeDee Lamb's opportunities have still been massive. He's not playing very well. Like he's dropping passes. Yeah. He's doing very non-CeeDee Lamb type things. I don't think we've seen a flip where like George Pickens is the wide receiver 1 for the Cowboys. I think George Pickens is a very, very, very good wide receiver 2. So like I personally think that Lamb should still be projected ahead of Pickens, but obviously they're very close. And in any given game, flip a coin more or less. But yeah, I want to get to both of them. I am right around the field on both at captain. I'm right around the field at flex on Pickens, and then a little bit over the field at flex on Lamb, which again probably just comes back to the fact that I still think Lamb is better, ahead of George Pickens.
Yeah. I mean, past 3 weeks, we have seen Pickens get more targets than Lamb, but I think that is just kind of a small sample size, fluky thing. Any given game, you don't really know who's going to get there, and they're both being targeted heavily. It's been 32 over the past 3 for Pickens, 26 for Lamb. Lamb actually running more routes than Pickens over that span. I think I see it the same as you, even if it's like we're just kind of going on instinct to some extent with the I think Lamb is still the wide receiver 1. Not like it's by a huge margin. It's not like, I don't know, it's not like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, but yeah.
In the games that Lamb has completed this year, 0.27 targets per route run for Lamb, 0.23 for Pickens. Okay. To your point, though, the most recent ones have gone Pickens' way. Like I think prior to the last few, it was like 0.19 for Pickens. So like you've seen that shoot up. Right. Ultimately, like this is just a spot where, and anybody that follows, my best ball takes or basically takes on anything is aware that like I tend to stick really strongly to priors unless I have like an actual reason to change them. And the prior in this case was the Cowboys have 2 really, really good receivers. George Pickens is going to be really good this year. CeeDee Lamb is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
Right.
Seeing George Pickens have better games for 3 games doesn't move the needle, but basically like clearly still a very good play.
Yeah, agreed. Those two, I think it's kind of, we don't have to talk too much about it. It is just kind of an obvious, it's a great spot. Top 3 matchup in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game over the past 5 weeks as well for Dallas. So everything looking good for the Dallas passing game. But then beyond those two, it's pretty interesting with Ryan Flournoy, Cavante Turpin, and Jalen Tolbert. Ryan Flournoy, 3,400 projected for 3% flex ownership. I got to 4%. Cavante Turpin, 2,400 projected for 7% flex ownership. I got to 46% in the flex and 1% at captain. And then Jalen Tolbert, 1,000 projected for 1% flex. I got to 7%. Are you also getting a massive amount of Turpin and then not as much on Flournoy and Tolbert?
Yeah, I don't really know why on Turpin. It has to like be an ownership thing. So what I think it is this probably will not, almost definitely will not end up being right. But right now there's a 65% ownership projection on 2K Tom Kennedy and 7% on 2,400 Cavante Turpin. It's one of those, we talked about it on our show on, I don't know, Monday, I guess. Yeah. There was some sort of ownership spot that like clearly was going to be different by lock. If these are the actual ownership numbers, like, yeah, give me a ton of Cavante Turpin because him and Tom Kennedy, I mean, Kennedy projects a little bit better, but in a 1-game sample, like it's probably 55-45 Kennedy or something. So like if Kennedy were actually going to be nearly 10% owned, I'm just jamming Cavante Turpin, but Kennedy's not going to be 10% or 10 times as popular.
Yeah. And I mean, Turpin, interesting usage. He's always been pretty interesting, but over the past 3 games, 6 targets, 40% route participation. Like that's fine for a wide receiver 3, but then also the past 2 games, 5 carries. So like that was something that we were kind of banking on with Turpin. It kind of went away for a while, and then that seems to have come back over the past couple weeks. They're leaning on him a bit more. So yeah, you throw the carries in with the receiving work. Suddenly he like has a pretty good usage. Obviously, can always make a big splash play, either a touchdown or just a really long play. So I was planning on being over the field on Turpin. I don't know if I want to be over the field to this extent. Like you said, probably things will change somewhat between now and lock. Flournoy, sort of interesting in his own way. 36% routes in week 13, 45% in week 12. I don't know. Like I want to be excited about Flournoy. I guess 5 targets, that's not nothing. I don't know. But Tolbert to me is the toughest to really get excited about. Only 13% route participation in that last game. Although, as we saw on Monday with the Patriots, all it takes is one target for a Kyle Williams or Jalen Tolbert to pay off his price tag. How interested are you? Are you getting to any Tolbert or Flournoy?
4% Flournoy, 7% Tolbert. Tolbert, sort of interesting because he's only 1K. He had been inactive and then went back to being active last week, ran 15% of routes. I assume you're getting something similar this week. I think Flournoy is just ahead of him, but there's a greater than 0% chance I'm wrong. And that, he runs 35% of routes at 1K, which would be appealing. But even, like you said, one play potentially gets it done. So I have a little bit, but obviously not anybody I want a lot of. Hasn't been running a lot of routes. Same for Flournoy, who is a bit more expensive, coming in at 3,400. Like the problem with Flournoy on this slate, it is going to keep his ownership down, but he's more expensive than Turpin. He's only 1K less than Tesla. He's 1,400 more than Kennedy. Like there's multiple receivers in that range that project better than him.
Yeah, it's a tough one because there is so much value on the slate. Also worth noting, Kyle Williams is not in the winning lineup despite having the one touchdown. So he like sort of gets there point per dollar, but like wasn't actually the player that you needed on that slate anyway.
I just wanted to look at some other ownership on Turpin versus Kennedy, and I'm seeing like closer to like 3 or 4x Kennedy to Turpin, which would probably flatten things out.
Yeah, that makes sense. On the Lions side, we have a very small sample size of the Lions without Amon-Ra St. Brown, so it's hard to know, how much to read into that one game sample. But Jameson Williams saw 10 targets in that game after Amon-Ra St. Brown went down in the first quarter. He's 8,400, projected for 52% flex, 20% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 14% flex, 7% captain, way under the field on JMO. Are you getting the same, and do you plan on sticking with it, or do you think you'll do anything to get to a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm under the field too, but again, I think it might be an ownership thing.
Yeah, I would guess. I mean, just looking at the ownership here,
I think 52 is probably a little high, and then also at the same time, possibly the Pickens and Lamb ownership is a little bit low, but probably not. But I do think the Williams ownership might be projected a little bit high. I kind of go back and forth on Williams because, like, you can make the case of the Cowboys have, outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, the Cowboys have nobody that they have to worry about other than Jameson Williams in the passing game. So, like, they could just try and scheme Jameson Williams out of this game and make the Lions beat them with other guys. That's entirely possible. Also, like, Jameson Williams is not as good as the fantasy community wants to think he is, I don't think. I was really annoyed with the game he had on Thanksgiving when he was super popular and St. Brown got hurt. And then I was doubly annoyed when I actually went back and looked, because like the whole talking point coming into that game was like, oh, with Campbell calling the plays, you're getting like a different route tree for Jameson Williams, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
He was getting fewer targets per route run in the 3 games that Dan Campbell had been calling plays, not by a substantial amount, like 0.16 to 0.17, but he had not seen any sort of bump with Dan Campbell. People just made shit up, and then St. Brown got hurt, and then suddenly Jameson Williams gets 0.33 targets per route run. So like the pro case for Williams is obviously he got 0.33 targets per route run in that game with no Amon-Ra St. Brown, no Sam Laporta, and maybe it happens again, and it doesn't have to happen again. He's 8,400. Anything close to that is going to make him look good. His prop line is like 80.5 yards. We haven't projected for 86, 87. We haven't projected for like 18, 19 fantasy points, somewhere in there. Like, he obviously looks very good. But it is always scary when you have, and again, like Gibbs obviously is a threat, but like of the wide receivers and tight ends, you have one guy that you're concerned with. That is just, always a concerning thing. And he's going to be very, very popular. So I think it goes without saying that Jameson Williams is a very strong play. Like he's the cheapest of the wide receivers, the good wide receivers. I also think there's a real chance that he gets more ownership than is warranted because people just absolutely love clicking Jameson Williams.
Yeah, I'm largely with you on all of that. Like JMO, that was the most frustrating thing on Thanksgiving because Dan Campbell came in. It did appear like the first game he saw more targets and stuff. So it was like, okay, maybe he's a different player now with Dan Campbell. I talked, I think on that week's Outside the Box, the following week with Scott Barrett, he was like, he didn't actually see a different usage. Like people think he did, and then I think he put up a 0 in that game fantasy wise as like people were playing him a lot more, assuming that he had made a change. And then I think it was just the next week was Thanksgiving, and people were still, for some reason, really in on Jameson Williams. And somehow Amon-Ra St. Brown on Thanksgiving was only 25%. I was so excited about how much Amon-Ra St. Brown I had when the card slipped over. And then, of course, he gets hurt 2 plays in. Super frustrating with Jameson Williams. But it is like, as much as that is all true, and like I usually, like if Jameson Williams is going to be chalk, I want to fade Jameson Williams. We don't have a huge sample size of Jameson Williams without Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and even Brock Wright at this point. And Khalif Raymond is out. Like they don't have any of their starters or even like their backups. Like they're playing with third stringers here at this point with Jameson Williams. So like you said, like you're projecting him really well. I do think if he comes in at 72%, I'm going to want to be under the field on JMO. If he comes in at 40%, I'd want to be over the field on JMO. It's going to be something where we're paying close attention on to the ownership as we get closer to lock. And then we have beyond JMO.
DC Fantasy said it was quality and different targets, more crossers and mid-range instead of deep shots. I don't care where his routes that he's not getting targeted are run. Like he can run horizontal wind sprints, he can run vertical wind sprints. I don't care. Like they weren't throwing him the ball.
Right. I mean, he put up a 0 after the week when everybody's all excited about it. He put up a literal 0 in that game. Anyway, we don't need to. I feel like JMO is one of like more polarizing players in fantasy, where it's just like people love him. They've just wanted him to be a thing for years now, and now he seems to be becoming a thing with all of his teammates getting hurt. But anyway, I'm obviously anti. I didn't play a ton of JMO in best ball, so he's about to bury me.
Actually, I still need to get the right stat. And to be fair, I'm actually a pro JMO guy. Like I've always liked him. I wanted Washington to draft him when they drafted.
Sure, he's a strong player.
Yeah, like this, to be clear, it's like I'm saying he's not very good in the context of like of good receivers and how I think the fantasy community views him. More, not saying he's like not actually good, but like the guy doesn't get targets. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But like now, obviously, with St. Brown out, he probably will. It's just a matter of will Dallas, how heavily will Dallas look to make him not beat them?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I agree. I think he's a strong player, cheering for him in the long run. Don't want him to bury all my best ball teams because he is one of my bigger fades in best ball this year. And I was taking George Pickens over him, so I'm feeling okay about that. But now it could bury me in the playoffs. Anyway.
Agreed, DC Fantasy.
Isaac TeSlaa, Tom Kennedy, we should see some kind of a bump here. Isaac TeSlaa is 4,400 projected for 29% flex, 1% captain ownership. I'm only getting into 12% flex, 1% captain of TeSlaa. So well under the field on TeSlaa. Kennedy also projected for 65% flex, 5% captain at 2,000. I'm only getting to 11%. These are all numbers that would terrify me if this were my actual exposure, because obviously they're probably going to have to throw to somebody other than JMO and Gibbs. So somebody should have a good game from Detroit, but everybody looking majorly over-owned here. What are you getting with the beyond JMO with the pass catchers here?
Yeah, so I'm not getting to much of TeSlaa or Kennedy. Kennedy, again, is because the ownership is wrong, and I wouldn't want Kennedy if he's 65% owned, but he won't be 65% owned. TeSlaa at 4,400. I think this is one of the most difficult projection spots, even more difficult than figuring out how the hell to project Jameson Williams and how often he gets targeted. The TeSlaa Kennedy thing, because like TeSlaa has been obviously very productive in terms of fantasy points per times he has caught the ball, because everything he catches is in the end zone. But he has been incapable of actually earning targets, including last week when St. Brown got hurt. He still was like 0.08 targets per route run or something. And so like he's done absolutely nothing this year to suggest that he is capable of like getting open and getting Jared Goff to throw him the ball. But at the same time, he ran like 95% of routes. He's 4,400. He's going to be on the field a ton. And we are talking small sample sizes. So like he probably at least gets to, like the old, 0.14 to 0.16 range that Jameson Williams lives in when St. Brown's healthy. So based on like the information we have, and also we've seen Tom Kennedy be like the shorter ADOT guy, like 9 yards per catch. Tesla, the lower catch rate, more downfield type guy, kind of big play guy, and then obviously end zone threat. But again, it's all small samples. So like with the information we have, you end up projecting Kennedy and Tesla pretty close because Kennedy's actually been better in that small sample at earning targets, and then Tesla is making the bigger plays. There's a real chance that, full week of practice and prep and everything, and Tesla is the number 2 receiver, that Tom Kennedy is just out there running around and Tesla gets, 8 targets or something. Like that can easily happen. So like, I think there is a lot of projection volatility here where at the median, like Tom Kennedy looks really underpriced at 2K. Tesla looks a little underpriced at 4,400, but like you still are touchdown reliant, blah, blah, blah. There's a real chance that like tomorrow morning you look back and go like, wow, 75% of the field didn't play 4,400 Tesla as the wide receiver too.
Yeah, it could go a lot of different ways. I agree with you. Like he just has not earned targets. We saw even in that last game on Thanksgiving, 84% route participation, just 2 targets in that game. Whereas Tom Kennedy, 68% ran 4. Tom Kennedy ran primarily out of the slot. He seems to be taking on the Amon-Ra St. Brown role more, whereas Isaac Tesla already had been kind of seeing his role grow. And then with Khalif Raymond, he benefits from Khalif Raymond being out, but then obviously should benefit somewhat from Amon-Ra being out as well. So I kind of expect this to hold where it's Tesla running the second most routes. I don't know that it matters. But yeah, it's a tough one to predict. I just want to touch on, Aaron says, large standard deviation is what you want for showdown dart throws. I feel like that's an oversimplification, like to some extent, because dart throws, like for 5% owned plays, I agree. Like you want that for 5% owned plays, but you don't necessarily want a ton of volatility in players who are getting a ton of ownership. Not that that's what you're saying, but I'm just like, it's a nuanced game we play. Like
ownership is part of the equation.
There. Yeah, ownership is a huge part of the equation.
Like the bigger the standard deviation, the more willing you should be to pivot away from high ownership.
Yes.
Generally.
Yeah. Still, we're obviously also oversimplifying it, but I'm just like, I feel like
you still need there to be pivots to go to. It's not, big standard deviation, a lot of ownership, don't play him. Like there has to be somebody that is remotely comparable. But yeah, ownership obviously part of the equation there.
Yeah.
But also yes, if you have a 5% owned 1K guy that has a high standard deviation and a 5% owned 1K guy that doesn't, take the bigger one.
Yeah. Anyway, Dominic Lovett, I did not even, where is he? Do you run? He ran 0 routes, has not run any routes, but I guess going to be active potentially. So maybe now with him being active, he's playable. I'm getting to 0.3%, field at 1%. Could just be a, dart throw that we don't really know anything about. You get into any Lovett?
I am not. I was kind of just trying to think through, because like right now I'm not getting a lot of Williams. I'm not getting a lot of Tesla, and then not getting a lot of Kennedy. But again, I think that just has to do with the ownership. I'm trying to think through, like, I'm not really a big proponent, especially on showdown slates, because things can just go so many different ways of like the types of rules, like if I don't have this guy, I want more of this guy kind of thing. But like, I'm trying to think through, because of how much uncertainty there is with Tesla and to some extent Jameson Williams. Like, and again, like obviously they both benefit if just like the passing game is good in general, but going back to the point of like, what if Dallas just like rolls coverage and double teams Jameson Williams the entire game and does everything they can to keep Jameson Williams from beating them? It should make it easier for Tesla to theoretically get open and actually get targets. And we know the routes are going to be there. The only question on Tesla is like, is he ever open?
Right.
So like, I think there is just this big moving piece where like potentially Dallas takes away Jameson Williams, and it does open up Tesla to where if you knew for a fact that Dallas keys in on Jameson Williams, you would increase Tesla's projection by more than the standard situation where a team doubles the number 1 receiver.
I want to see if I can find separation score. Let's see. Separation score for the Lions on the season.
Did they do negative?
Zero separation. They do negative, and Tesla is negative in terms of separation score on the season. So that's not ideal. Shane Zylstra, on the other hand, is a separation score maniac. He that probably means one route run, he got separation on his one route. So congrats to Shane Zylstra on that.
So does negative just mean like Tesla was so bad at getting open that like the corner like overran him and ended up with him like getting open?
Yeah, I don't know. He ran into the cornerback.
Right.
I guess like the cornerback just stood there. I have no idea.
He was like so slow getting off the line. The corner thought it was a screen and he jumped it, and it actually wasn't.
Exactly. This is a lot of explanations, none of them good, for why Isaac Tesla would have a negative separation score. It is funny, like just given like early in the season, he had a couple monster plays where we're like, I think this guy's really good if he ever gets an opportunity. And I mean, he still might be. You never know if this will change. Or I'm gonna look up the Cowboys now too, because I feel like the knock on Pickens for forever was that he was bad at separating. Yeah, he's actually been better this year.
I was going to ask how he compared to Pickens.
Yeah, Pickens has a positive 0.1 separation score.
I think
not far
playing CeeDee Lamb probably helps.
Yeah, I think that probably does make a difference. Tolbert really negative, worse than Tesla.
I wonder why he has been inactive a lot.
Yeah, Flournoy a little bit better. Turpin actually really good in terms of separation score. Interesting. All right.
And so I was AFC Angelo said it. He said, does it open up Tesla or does it even further help Gibbs out of the backfield? Probably both, but also not sold this sellout for JMO. Gibbs seems the most likely target, but that's mostly their own defense. Yeah, I'm thinking, like, obviously Gibbs is like the biggest threat here, but I'm thinking more in terms of like what they're doing with safety help over the top and all of that for JMO. Like Gibbs and JMO just being different, positions, different routes type of thing.
Yeah. AFC Angelo asks, if you made the rule, would it be JMO Gibbs or JMO Tesla? I wouldn't make a rule with any of those, that trio.
If I made I assume he's asking about the like bump one.
Oh, bump. Okay. Yeah.
I think if I made the rule, it would be with Tesla because there's no uncertainty really around Gibbs. Like, yeah, he could get targeted even more than being projected, but he's already being projected for like 0.28, 0.29 targets per route run. My point with Tesla is like, normally you're talking about, let's just call it X margin of error in the target per route run projection, and it'll go up by X amount if they take targets away from JMO. We don't even know what the actual X is for Tesla because it's been so bad this year. It's been like unbelievably bad to the point that like it probably can't actually be that bad. So you're already like guessing on what it is. So your margin of error is just bigger. And if they take away Jameson Williams, then like it gets even bigger. So like that's kind of what I'm getting at is like there's so much uncertainty in how to project Tesla and also in what the Cowboys are going to do defensively that I think it's not necessarily covered that well, even by just, simulating and running range of outcomes type stuff.
Yeah. We have a tiny sample size. This is kind of a unique situation. It'll be very much a pay attention to ownership with Tesla for me. Anyway, anything else on wide receivers?
Nope.
All right, let's move on to tight ends. Jake Ferguson, another one similar to Dave Montgomery for me in that I saw the price tag and I was like, maybe I can just full fade that, but that's not what the Sims are giving me. He's projected for 14% flex, 1% captain ownership. I'm getting to 23% flex, 2% captain, so actually a little bit overweight on Jake Ferguson. What are you doing? Are you planning on being overweight there?
Yeah, I have 20% flex, 2% captain. So not crazy overweight or anything like that, but like clearly still the tight end one. Obviously, doesn't benefit from CeeDee Lamb being healthy and getting targets and all that. But still clear role, 0.2 targets per route run in the games that CeeDee Lamb has played start to finish. So it's not like he completely disappears. He's still getting, more targets per route run than anybody on the team other than Lamb, Pickens, and any regular guy running routes than Lamb, Pickens. Like he's still involved around the goal line. And most importantly, he's just not getting that much ownership.
Yeah. The ownership looks pretty good on Ferguson. Just over 5 targets per game. This is Zach Ertz-esque play. Like Zach Ertz, who I full faded or didn't full fade, but did not play. And then he had 12 targets out of nowhere. That can certainly happen for Ferguson. It's less likely, I think, because there's much better target competition on the Cowboys, but they might need to throw a lot to keep up, can score touchdowns, all that. So at this low ownership, looks pretty good. We've also got Schoonmaker and Brevin Span Ford, 1% ownership going to Schoonmaker. I'm getting to 10%. 3% going to Spanford. I'm getting to 4%. You also overweight on the backup receivers?
Yeah, I have 10 and 2, Schoonmaker and Spanford. There's not a lot to say there. They're backup hit ends. Schoonmaker should be on the field for probably like 15% or so, I think, going off the top of my head. Yeah, like 18% of routes, or dropbacks rather. Spanford, anywhere from like 5 to 15%.
Yeah, both have 2 targets over the past 3 games. You're really just hoping for a miracle, hoping for a touchdown if you play them. And then beyond those two, Lions a little bit more interesting because we have obviously Sam Laporta has been out, but now we also get Brock Wright out. I guess he was out last game also, but Ross Dwelly, 2,800 projected for 9% flex ownership. I'm getting to 25 and 1 at captain. Anthony Ferkser, 1,600 projected for 3%. I'm getting to 7%. And then Hayden Rucci projected for 0.5%. I'm not getting to any at 200. Are you also overweight on Dwelly and Ferkser?
Yeah, Dwelly in particular. I only have 5% Ferkser right now. Wouldn't mind getting a little bit more, but I have 27% Dwelly. And again, like if you wanted to flatten that a little bit, I think it's fine. Like really, you're hoping one of them gets into the end zone, and I think there's a lot of volatility there. But we did see last week 56% route participation for Dwelly, 25 for Ferkser. Ferkser was viewed back when he was on the Titans as a capable pass catcher. So like going into last week, I thought it was kind of up in the air exactly what they're going to do route-wise between them. And it is still up in the air. I mean, they had just activated Ferkser, I think, from the practice squad. Maybe he runs more routes this week than he did last week. I certainly don't think there's just like set in stone stability with a third and fourth string tight end here. But based on the information we have that we got last week, you did have like more than double the route participation for Dwelly compared to Ferkser. He's only $2,800. There are infinite targets available here because, again, like Jameson Williams, we assume, is going to draw a bunch of targets because he did last game. But like even JMO is somebody that throughout his career has not drawn a lot of targets. Tesla doesn't get targets. Kennedy, was like a 0.18 target per route run guy in a small sample. The only guys that like you think are soaking up targets here are Gibbs and probably Williams. So like somebody has to be the secondary guy, and it could easily be. Well, I mean, it could be Ferkser, but like easily could be Dwelly too if he's out there 55, 60% of the time.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. I like being overweight. I think Ferkser like sort of interesting in that he didn't play until week 12, and then we've seen him bump up from 4% to 23%, and like he's a decent receiving tight end, so maybe we see that continue to move upward for him. So I kind of like both of them, and I'm a bit overweight on both. Dwelly is like the safer option, it feels like, after he ran so many routes last week and saw how many targets he saw. Wait, is this? Oh, it's 11 through 13. Let me see. Just week 13 with no Brock Wright. 2 targets on 52% route participation. That could increase all. Yeah, I think the Lions tight ends make sense. Not getting any Hayden Rucci. Did he run any routes last week? Doesn't look like he's running a route yet. Okay. Interesting. So I guess it's possible he comes in and has a role. But we have no reason to believe that. Hopefully it'll be inactive so we don't have to worry about Hayden Rucci. Anything else?
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye. Somebody's asked in chat too, but Zach Horton played last week, but as of now, as far as I can tell, is on the practice squad. So need to pay attention to if he's activated and then what they do with inactives. Right now, don't have him in projections.
Okay. Moving on to defenses and kickers. We'll just do these all at once. Not getting too much of the defense kickers. I'm getting 22% of the Cowboys at 3% projected ownership, 7% of the Lions at 10% projected ownership, 10% Jake Bates, 12% Brandon Aubrey. Aubrey getting 30% ownership. He's the only real chalk of the group. Interesting. What are you getting with your kickers and defenses?
Like 8% a piece at kicker. I do think Aubrey's ownership projection is probably a little bit high. And he would, I guess, be the preferred one in terms of projection, but I think they're very, very similar. Defense, I do have 27% Dallas. They're only projected for 3% ownership, which seems crazy low. Not that like I expect them to get a lot, but 3% ownership at 3,600, I would like to roll the dice. And then I have 10% Detroit. But again, if we assume that like ownership comes up a bit on Dallas and comes down a bit on Aubrey, it probably flattens out some.
Yeah. Who is Horton? I had the same question, but I think
ninth string tight end.
Ninth string on the Lions.
Yeah.
So Lions backup tight end who may or may not be active.
Backup
Yeah.
tight end.
Reminder, please like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed. I am trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. Getting closer, but need some support to make that final push. Anything else on, I mean, defenses, I'm like the Cowboys, like it's a better defense, and the Lions will be without Amon-Ra St. Brown. We did see the Lions get kind of shut down by the Eagles. Like I'm a little bit tempted by 3% owned Dallas. So I guess I'll have that note on the defense looking a bit better. The Lions
I like the price. I like
yeah.
that you can at least squint and envision how the Lions just look bad because they don't have St. Brown and they don't have Laporta. Dallas did improve their defense. Like, again, not that I think the most likely case is that they do well. This game has a 54.5 point total, but like they have a statue at quarterback. Like you can come up with reasons that make you feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah. And then Brandon Aubrey is the one that the ETR guys always mention. He apparently he's chalky. Like as far as kickers go, people love playing Brandon Aubrey. So maybe he does come in closer to the ownership that we have here because he's name brand. It's a weird slate because there's so much other value, and I'm not sure if it's going to be the case on this specific slate, just because people are going to want to play their Tesla and Kennedy and all that. But
yeah, typically, I do think people like clicking Aubrey. I think you and I talked about it too, though. I haven't actually looked at this, but I would assume it's the case that, like, with the new K balls and every kicker now just blasting 50-yard field goals, relatively, that's bad for Brandon Aubrey in terms of value because, like, he went from being the only guy that was making these kicks or even attempting these kicks to, like, everybody off the practice squad is making them.
Right. Yeah. So you can make cases here. You can make a case against Brandon Aubrey, theoretically at least. Jake Bates, strong kicker for the Lions as well, but then obviously he does not benefit from Dan Campbell being aggressive, wanting to go forward all the time. That's always like I always want to play Jake Bates because I'm like he's a good kicker on a team that should score a lot of points, and then it's so frustrating watching the game. It's like, oh, it's 4th and 6. Like the analytics actually say you shouldn't go for it here, and Dan Campbell's going to go for it anyway. So I don't know, it's tough. Anything else on this game?
Nope.
Isn't this a must-win for Detroit? I think it might be, or it's certainly a game that they really want to win. I don't know if it's like they're knocked out of the playoffs if they don't win it, but it's definitely very much would help them if they do win. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll be back tonight prior to lock as usual, doing the whole breakdown after an actives come out. Adam, are you doing any kind of NBA show? Anything else today?
Yeah, I think I'm doing an NBA show around like 4.
All right, so check out the Run the Sims live channel for Adam's NBA breakdown around 4 o'clock, and then pop back over here for NFL after inactives come out. Thanks everybody. Join the Flaniverse Discord, free to join. Link in description of the video. That's all we got. We'll see you later on. Good luck today.